In this video, we're going to be discussing how to solve this problem relating to graphs of equations and lines in Algebra 1. Here's the problem statement. In the given pair of equations up here, a and b are constants. The graph of this pair of equations in the xy plane, which is basically your average coordinate plane, you've probably seen it before. It looks something along the lines of this with the lines on it. The x and y axis. That's the xy plane, or x is going to be to the right and y is going to be up and down. The graph of this pair of equations in the xy plane is a pair of perpendicular lines, meaning one of them, it looks like this, like a cross, basically. They never meet. That's basically what that means. Which of the following pairs of equations also represents a pair of perpendicular lines? Just to erase this. So, to solve this problem, we're going to need to use a very handy and very useful formula that allows us to solve these kinds of questions that relates the slopes of perpendicular lines. So as a quick review, the slope of a line is basically its steepness. So you might think that a line very steep like this has a high slope. It's basically the rise over run, or how much distance it travels in the x direction, and related to how much distance it travels in the y direction. And there's an easy formula for calculating slope that we're not going to need to use it in this question, though, so I'm not going to bother explaining that. We don't even need to go that far for this question. And this would be a line that has a low slope. Okay, so we're trying to find out, there's actually a very useful equation that relates the slopes of perpendicular lines. So the slope of any line, as you might already know, is going to be a over b. So a over b is the slope of any line of the form ax plus by equals c, where a, b, and c are constants. So we have an equation, two equations, and both of these here are in the form ax plus by equals c, called standard form. So we've got our 5x plus 7y equals 1. That's our first equation. Our a is 5, and our b is 7. That means the slope of this first equation is 5 over 7. Okay, that's the slope. It's a fraction here. And then, what we need to figure out is which the following... Okay, so here's what we need to do. We need to figure out what a and b needs to be here. That's our first step. We need to figure out values for the constants a and b that we can then use to plug into these choices down here and then get our answer. So there's an easy way to find the relationship between the slope of two perpendicular lines. All it is the simple expression negative b over a, where in the same equation, b and a are the same variables. So if we had a line with slope 5 over 7, a perpendicular line would have slope negative 7 over 5. And that right there tells us the slope of this second line, because the question tells us that the graph of this pair of equations in the xy plane is a pair of perpendicular lines. So the slope of the second equation, we know, must be negative 7 over 5 by this law. Okay, so now we can move on to solving the problem. So they give us a variety of choices here. They give us 4 choices, and they're almost the same. We've got the 10x plus 7y equals 1 as the first equation for 4 of the choices. So what we're going to do here is just going to go through some simple reasoning here. So what we need to know is, okay, the slope of this first equation, this 10x plus 7y equals 1, the slope is 10 over 7, of course. So the a is 10 and the b is 7. So that's the slope of that equation. So that means the second equation needs to be perpendicular to the first one, because they want to know which one of these pairs represents a pair of perpendicular lines. So what we can do is we can find the slope, what the slope needs to be of that second equation. So for the second equation to be a parallel line a perpendicular line to the first equation, the slope of that second equation, of that second line, needs to be negative 7 over 10. That's going to be the inverse. So that's our negative b over a formula again. So we know our second equation must have a slope of negative 7 over 10 if the first equation is 10x plus 7y equals 1. So we can go through these choices here. That's pretty much all you need to do here. For choice A, all you have to do is plug in your values of A and B and check if you have a slope of negative 7 over 10. So for this first equation, we're going to go ahead and put this over here to the left. I'm going to begin writing. Our A is negative 7. So we have negative 7x. And then our B is 5. So minus 5 times 2, that's minus 10. So minus 10y equals 1. However, our slope there is going to be negative 7 over negative 10, which is 7 over 10. Because when we have a negative and a negative in the numerator and the denominator, it becomes a positive. And 7 over 10 is not negative 7 over 10. So the answer cannot be choice A. We now move on to choice B. We plug in our values for A and B just as we did with the previous choice. We get our negative 7x again. Since our value for B is 5, we then have plus 10y equals 1. As you can see here, the slope is going to be negative 7 over 10. And that's correct. That satisfies our required slope. And that's all we need to do. We're done here. We found our answer, and that's choice B. We don't even need to go through the other ones because they only want 1, and that one has satisfied a requirement. Okay, so that's all we needed to do there. This is a pretty simple problem that that demonstrates the usefulness of the slope formulas when dealing with lines in standard form of the ax plus by equals c form. So whenever you need to find the slope of a line, remember that it's always going to be a over b. Also remember that the slope of a perpendicular line is always going to be negative b over a. Just as an extra piece of information here, the slope of a parallel line, two parallel lines, they're always going to have the same slope. So if one line has a slope of 3 over 5, and you know a second line is parallel to that line, you know that second line is also going to have a slope of 3 over 5. Alright, that's it for this graphing lines and equations question under Algebra 1.